Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Town Series. My name is Elizabeth Ajayi Bridges, and I am the chair of the Michigan chapter of NAPAC USA. Our mission is to engage, inform, and empower Nigerian Americans in the United States through policy impact, education, health and wellness, effective advocacy, and economic empowerment. At this time, we are taking members. So I will put a link in our chat forum and I'll ask if you can please take a look. Also, we are working on a campaign on the Michigan Crown Act. So please check that out too. Thank you.
Okay, and I will take over. My name is Bonike, and I serve as the secretary for NAPAC Michigan. Our special guest tonight is Mr. Darnell Blackburn, who is with the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards, referred to as MCOLES in Michigan. MCOLES is the regulatory agency for all law enforcement entities in the state of Michigan. They oversee training for police agencies as well as develop curriculum for police academies and set licensing standards. Darnell has acted as a facilitator with the U.S. Department of Justice alongside previous Attorney General Loretta Lynch and former Attorney General Jeff Sessions on police and community relations. So it's only befitting that we have him today, since he's responsible for training our police officers to talk to us on police brutality. So welcome, Mr. Blackburn.
I gotta unmute myself. Thank you for having me, Bonike. Thank you so much. And
okay,
everyone.
So we're gonna dive right into it. Darnell, Kim Porter, 26 years on the force, right? And things that come to mind is yellow versus black, 2 pounds versus 8 ounces, and the placement of weapons when you train. You train that with handguns are on the dominant side of the belt. So could you please talk to us about what happened to Dante Wright?
Absolutely. First off, again, Bonike and everybody else, thank you for having me. I truly appreciate it. It's an honor to, as we stated earlier, to try to bridge this gap. So, I mean, quite frankly, what happened was a complete lapse in ability. I know that that this is hard to stomach, it's hard to fathom, you know, but I can tell you that based on all that I saw, as painful as this is, that was a completely unintentional act. However, it was an act that needs to be appropriately punished because of negligence. You know, just like with any profession, you can have somebody who is stellar at what they do and somebody that's not good at what they do. I can tell you, and let me kind of back up a little bit. The reason why I say that this was a very unintentional act is based on the entire sequence of events. One of the things that every police officer in the country who carries a taser is trained to do is to cross draw. You're absolutely right. To put the taser on the non-dominant side and cross draw and pull that taser out. And that is how they're trained. They wear their gun on their dominant side, taser on the other side. But the other thing that they're trained to do is when they're about to deploy the taser as a means to de-escalate a situation is they yell, taser, taser, taser. It's ingrained in every person that carries that taser's mind. So there's no doubt from her training and experience, or from what she said, that she was trained and she thought that she pulled the taser out instead of a handgun. Now, again, does that make it right? Absolutely not. Does that mean that she gets a pass? Absolutely not. But in understanding that, you know, because I know that, because I've seen it, because I've seen how the training goes, I understand that. Now, does that mean that she didn't have some unconscious and implicit bias that operated in her mind? Maybe it shouldn't even have gotten to that place anywhere where someone is driving away and you know, you taser them instead of grabbing them and pulling them out. So I can tell you that as painful and hard as it is to stomach, that is how every officer is trained. And again, 26 years on the job, that doesn't mean that she's a great officer. It just means that she has a long time standing on the job. The fact that she was a training officer doesn't mean that she's a great officer. It just means that she was tasked with training another officer. It's not like that's there's tests and everything that you're given. So, you know, I just think that her bias, her fear, her inability to just respond and react correctly caused her to do something that is just set off another firestorm.
To piggyback on that, just so you can elaborate a little bit more, can you talk us through that rush that you get when you're in the heat of the moment like that? Because I'm assuming there's a rush. I carry, and when I'm at the range, there's a rush. I don't know how to explain that, but there's this rush. So I can only imagine that for police officers that you carry 24/7, and you find yourself in a situation where you may have to draw the weapon. Walk us through that rush. Maybe we can understand a little bit better. We're trying to place ourselves in Kim Potter's shoes. So kind of walk us through that rush you normally get when you have a weapon with you.
I appreciate, for lack of a better term, you saying a rush. It's just an adrenaline push. It's a number of feelings. It's in every situation. You know, whether you're black, brown, yellow, white, whatever, you know, when you experience a situation, there's a fight or fight mentality when you get to that place. And, you know, you have to, you get the feeling and you get fearful, you get apprehensive. I mean, you don't want to harm or hurt somebody, but you have to do what you need to do in order to bring a person into custody in that type of situation. And I you know, it's you have to rely on your training, but you also have to have a cognizant ability to recognize when you're doing something that's not appropriate or not what you've been trained to do. And so, you know, instinctively, you're trained to do this, but you still have to be in the mindset of saying, okay, even though it's foggy, even though it's hazy, I got to still make sure that I'm cognizantly pulling the right thing. I'm not pulling my weapon, but pulling my taser. So, I mean, there's a number of emotions that a person goes through when you experience those types of things. And it's a fight or flight mentality and an adrenaline rush that comes over you. So, you know, again, I mean, you know, being in situations as an officer, you rely on your training, but you still have to be present. And you know, I think just not being present, coupled with, again, probably a lot of bias and fear that one has, causes you to do something that is just erroneously just bad.
Okay, thank you for that. So when you started off, you said you believe that it was unintentional, and you know, strangely enough, I believe that too. I think I liken this situation to when medical doctors perform surgery on the wrong body part, and they've been doing this forever. And I'm aware of a story where the wrong leg was amputated. And as a civilian, you look back and say, how can you miss that with all your training and the number of years you've been doing this? How do you miss that? But I hope you understand that for the general population, a lot of people can't see it as unintentionally because of the race relations that we have going on with police officers. So we'll move away from Kim Porter, and we're going to talk about George Floyd. Talk us through that training with, because that is part of a training where that's how you restrain in some cases. Talk to us about that.
It's absolutely not. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because it's not. So let me just talk about this speaking of George Floyd, and we look at this entire the sequence of events and everything that occurred. Even when we get to the place where there is someone, let me back up. There's there's opportunities where you use lethal force. It is to protect and safeguard and to protect a person or to protect your life as an officer. An imminent threat, which means that is right there, right now, and it's an imminent threat, and you can use lethal force. Anytime you cut off someone's circulation, you restrain their neck or do something like that, that is a lethal force situation. And I can speak for Michigan, being part of MCOLES. I can speak for Michigan, and most states are the same, but I'm speaking here for the state of Michigan, that a neck restraint of any kind, whether it's a knee or anything, is an exercise in lethal force. The only time that you can use lethal force is when there's an imminent threat of death. So let me paint this picture for you. What should have been done is you put your knee across the small of someone's back in order to keep them from bucking or getting up, and getting away, not your knee on someone's neck. Sorry, this is an elbow, it's not a knee, but it's still, you get the idea, putting it on somebody's neck. So let me paint this picture for you. The only way that that officer, alleged officer, could have done that to George Floyd, if it was legitimately and legally, if it were somehow that George Floyd could contort his body in handcuffs, or slip his hand out of a handcuff, had his hand on that officer's gun, and was in the process of about to shoot the officer or someone else. That's the only way that it would have been legitimate, which is virtually impossible for George Floyd for Mr. Floyd to have done that. So in that situation, the only time you can do that is in lethal force. And that was not a lethal force situation. That was a horrible, horrible situation in which somebody took their power and control and exercised it to take somebody else's life.
Okay, so this is my last question, then I'm going to hand it over to my team. You talked about imminent threat. So I'm going to jump from case to case. Okay, so you talked about imminent threat and when you can use force. So a 16-year-old, I can't remember her name right now, but a 16-year-old was launching at somebody else with a knife. A police officer shows up and he shoots. Talk me through that.
I know this is hard to stomach, because what we do is, as particularly those of us who are Black and brown, we identify and we see these situations happen over and over again, and it's hard for us to stomach and understand. But that was an imminent threat. When an officer shows up on scene and someone is wielding a knife, and they're in the process of attempting to stab one person, and they move from that person, they see the officer arrive, and they're mid swinging the knife down, the officer's only option to save a life is to fire that weapon. We are taught and trained that, running up and grabbing the knife out of her hand, there's a likelihood that he would be stabbed, that, he would be good to no one else because of that. It's a likelihood, even from that distance, tasering her, it was an imminent threat of death. And so even though, yes, she was 16, yes, she called the police, there is, that officer did everything the right way to save the other people's lives. And it's painful to watch, but it's just reality. Now, one of the other things I do want to bring up, if I could, Benike, with that particular incident, is I've heard people ask, and I appreciate them asking, how come he couldn't have shot her in the hand? How come he couldn't have shot her in the leg? You, as a person that carries, recognizes, and anybody else on this called the difficulty and the likelihood of being able to shoot somebody in the hand or shoot somebody in the leg or something like that. And then that may not eliminate the threat. As law enforcement officers, we're taught to shoot center mass to eliminate a threat. And that center mass is this area. For anybody who shoots, they know and understand that. So quite honestly, I appreciate people who have asked me the question, and I appreciate being able to expound upon it, because yes, it looks bad, but the reality is that man saved two people's lives. He did. And quite honestly, his ability to shoot and not shoot the other young lady who was in the process, who was the victim at that time of the potential stabbing, is phenomenal. From that distance and that range, it speaks to, his ability and his training and to not harm an innocent person at that particular moment in time.
All right, so I don't want to speak about facts here because I'm not clear on how this particular story, but could he or did he give a command for her to drop the weapon?
I believe that he said stop or put it down or something to that effect. I believe that from what I did see it and watched it over and over again, but I believe he did. Whether he did or did not, again, there's an imminent threat or danger, and imminent meaning that somebody is swinging a lethal force, a knife at somebody else. He did what he could to save the lives of the people who were in the process of being stabbed. So whether he gave the verbal command or not, he showed up on the scene, and I'm quite sure that he did say put it down or something to that effect. I'm sure he did, but nonetheless, there was nothing else that he could do aside from allow that young lady to get stabbed. And let me share, if I could, Benike, a little bit. One of the things that's interesting about this too is that, I've had this dialogue. I do training with police agencies as for my own company, my own business. I do training on unconscious and implicit bias and trying to make them understand, why we feel as a community, how we feel, and trying to convey the same thing to the community, which is why I appreciate these forums. But it's interesting, I had a white police officer say to me, and I thought it was horrible. He said, I probably would have let her, I wouldn't have handled it like that. I would have let the young lady get stabbed a couple of times and then tried to respond differently. And I don't know that that's right or wrong, because what if you're the parent of the young lady who's getting stabbed? Do you let her get stabbed? And I mean, it's a really tough situation. It's a tough situation.
So I have a question in the chat that says the people that stormed the Capitol all had weapons of imminent danger. Why were they not shut up as well?
I can't speak to that specifically, but I can try to address it from a law enforcement perspective. When let's talk about the reality of the people who stormed the Capitol. Let's talk about the reality of the bias that exists. We know in our community that there's a often disparate treatment in Black and brown people than there is in those who don't identify as such. Now, did that play a part in this? My personal belief, probably. But the other aspect of that is the idea of manpower. If you do have several thousand people, I can venture to say, versus, a couple of hundred cops, and you start shooting people, then you're going to have a massacre, and there's going to be a whole lot of loss of lives. Now, here's the other thing too. The other thing is that they did not physically attack the officers. I don't, as I recall, nobody came at an officer with a gun or a knife, or came at someone else with a gun or a knife. Yes, they stormed the Capitol, but again, it's a measure of, if you got somebody just storming the Capitol without a knife or a gun, it's a little different in how you respond. But I'm not taking away from the fact that there's some disparate treatment and some bias in that.
I know I said that was my last question before I give it to Akindele, but I have one more.
Okay.
So we talk about this blue blood, and what is it about this? Because as an outsider, this is what we perceive. Mm-hmm. There's this brotherhood with police officers. It doesn't matter that it's Black or white. There's a brotherhood with police officers. We actually had one police officer that we're gonna come over to be on the panel, and he respectfully bowed out. But he explained to me that it's just the brotherhood. What is that? And why is that so strong that sometimes we feel like it clouds your judgment as police officers? And I know you're a former police officer, but like I said, you're the only cop I know right now. So
I think first and foremost, policing is unique. It's unique in the fact that there's a subculture within policing. Now, again, yeah, there's a kindredness, there's a brotherhood, a sisterhood, because we have to rely on each other ultimately for our lives. Ultimately, that's the thought process. However, you know, it's sickening to me that somebody would say that because of the brotherhood, I don't want to have this conversation or turn or seem as if I'm turning against law enforcement, because what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. So for me, I can't understand that. I can't fathom that. I can tell you that I've stepped up when I've seen police officers that I feel have gone too far in making an arrest or saying or doing something. And I'm like, man, hold up, back up, come back. So I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. For me, you know, it's a bandwagon mentality that I don't subscribe to. Now, the other thing, Benika, I will tell you this, is that a lot of people, because of policing being a paramilitary organization and policing being what it is that some people aren't able to speak on this because of they don't want to be perceived as giving the opinion of their department that they work for. So that is a challenge for a lot of officers, because they don't have the ability to speak because of even not that they would say anything against the department, but they don't want the perception to come back and then them to be called to the carpet saying, well, you represented XYZ police department when you said that. No, I represented myself. So, I mean, that's something that happens quite often. So that could be a thing as well.
all right, Akindele, go for it. I think I beat him up a little bit. I'll come back.
No, you didn't.
All right.
You've done me way worse than this before. So this ain't nothing.
All right, thank you so much. So we have a lot of political theater surrounding policing in 2021. We have people saying defund the police. We have folks like Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib saying police should be eliminated altogether. And to be honest, when she said that, I thought it was an emotional response until I saw her on Flashpoint. And she explained to Devin Scillian that, no, I really mean get rid of policing, period. And all this stuff about sending money to train police, we need to cut that out too. She was serious about that. However, there's a bill in Congress that's been passed by the U.S. House. That's H.R. 1280. That's the George Floyd Policing Act. We heard President Biden last night talk about this bill should be passed by the first anniversary of George Floyd's death next month. It has not moved in the Senate. You're going to need 60 votes to pass it in the Senate. That means you have to somehow, some way pray to get 10 Republicans to go along with this bill. And one of the sticking points that I hear on the other side of the aisle is this thing about within the bill, and just for general purposes, the bill addresses a wide range of policies and issues regarding police practices. But one sticking point is to end qualified immunity, which protects law enforcement officers from most civil lawsuits. And so my question to you, because this is a big point, I listened to Congresswoman Cori Bush on Inside Politics with Abby Phillip on CNN.
Oh, he's frozen.
Oh, he's frozen. Oh, I thought it was me. Thank God it wasn't me.
Oh, did you try to mute my colleague
Yeah,
right
no,
there?
It was good. I didn't want to mute him. It was good. I thought it was my computer.
No, it's on his end. But and I don't know where he's going with the question, but from what he said so far, do you have any comments on that? Oh, go ahead. Akindele, you froze. So
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me ask the question again. So with all the chaos that's going on in 2021 between the police and the community, do you feel that we should end qualified immunity?
That was a long route to get to an easy question. Well, let me make sure that qualified immunity is kind of So let me explain. Qualified immunity is police officers being not necessarily being prosecuted civilly or criminally, as I understand it, for any deeds that can occur while they're in office. Am I right, Ekindele? That's what. So quite honestly, in qualified immunity is really not a thing, at least from my perspective, because most police officers that I know at some point have been sued civilly because of something that has happened, whether it's been upheld or not upheld. They've been a lot of, not most, but I know a lot of police officers who were sued civilly. Some under what I may consider frivolous lawsuits, some legitimate lawsuits. So I mean, we talk about qualified immunity, but really it doesn't exist. People are still being prosecuted, and I can speak from this perspective, Akindele, from the perspective of working for MCOLES, the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards, which is the standard setting agency, which is where I work full time. We grant licenses to every officer in the state of Michigan, but just like we grant them, guess what we do? We revoke them. And so, that process occurs after typically some sort of adjudication of guilt, or even maybe not even guilt after the criminal proceedings or civil proceedings have occurred. Sometimes what we say is, you have, even if you haven't been convicted, you have to voluntarily surrender your license. So really, quite honestly, qualified immunity is only to a certain degree, but really it doesn't exist. There's still the ability to prosecute law enforcement officers when they do things improper, and to come after them civilly. So, from that perspective. So, I can't say that I think it should be eliminated. So maybe I didn't answer the question. I don't think that it should be eliminated, because it doesn't exist. It's already there.
I think the concern that people have, though, is here's a case that I'll tell you two cases that bother me the most, outside of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and people like that. You had a gentleman in Minnesota who was pulled over by the police. He said, "I have a CPL license." He announced it to the cop. He's reaching for his wallet. He still gets shot in front of his girlfriend and dies. You have a situation in Louisiana where a gentleman was selling CDs out the store, in front of the store. Two police officers came, arrested him. Now they have him pinned down, and they still shot him to death. There was another gentleman, and here's the third one, I'm sorry. In Florida, I think he was taking care of the patient had a mental health issue. He had his hands up, and the officer still shot him. And there's many, many other cases like that. So I think this thing about ending, qualified immunity, I think the issue is we see cops being sued on the civil level, but at the end of the day, they're back on the beat, or they find another line of work in another police jurisdiction. So I mean, I think that's the reason why people want to just end this. And if you kill unjustly, you should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with that. And I can tell you, again, to be able to present the other side, we take their licenses. The thing is that you just don't know that we're removing, that people are being prosecuted, that even if they're not convicted, we're still taking people's licenses. Because you know why you don't know it? Because it's not news media worthy. It does not come across. It does not show. So, I can't say that every officer that does something wrong that we're getting their license and we're doing all that. But I can tell you that we revoke about 2 or 3 licenses a month, that people are being prosecuted for doing things inappropriately and improper. And they're being prosecuted, and revocations are happening here in Michigan, but that stuff doesn't get known. I give you, just as you gave an example, I'll give you an example of some years ago, I believe it was Inkster, a guy that beat up the guy in Ink.
Yeah.
Boom. What happened was it was determined that he had issues in his previous department. He got to the city of Inkster and got there before the background and everything was done, which was an issue there. But we resolved that to make sure that you cannot hire someone else without doing a thorough background. Boom, his stuff is gone. He'll never be a cop again. So we're doing those things. So as far as qualified immunity, I mean, to look from the other perspective, it was put in place to try to help officers who are doing the right thing, who do end up just getting sued for doing something that is within their means to do. So I can't say that that it should be eliminated when you still get prosecuted, you still get civilly charged, or people still come after you civilly. So I can't necessarily say that I'd like to see it.
And it's interesting you brought up Inkster. I remember that. I was kind of in the middle of that. It happened not too far from me in Inkster, where and I knew that police chief very well, who hired that gentleman from DPD to Inkster. He was actually, what people don't know, he was actually trying to get hired in Romulus, and they told him no. He ended up in Inkster because he was friends with the police chief. Mm-hmm. The issue again, even with qualified immunity and all these things, the issue at the end of the day is that the city gets sued. Mm-hmm. We were sued for $3 million. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was $3 million that the city didn't have. And it came out of property taxes, and people were very upset. Mm-hmm. Each time a cop is sued in a settlement, that doesn't come out of their personal stuff. That comes from the taxpayers. Mm-hmm. And we have to keep that in mind, especially in cash-strapped communities like Inkster and Ecorse, mm-hmm. where they've been under state receivership for quite some time. I do have another question for you. Do you think that policing in the United States right now needs to fundamentally change? And I ask that question because when I research other police agencies around the world, it is very, very vastly different. You have Germany, where you have to spend 2 to 3 years before you even put on a badge. You have places like the UK and Ireland, they don't even carry guns. Mm-hmm. And so other nations have extensive training to become a police officer. Here is not a very short period of time. Do you think we should fundamentally change in this day and age? Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I can tell you from a perspective of a law enforcement administrator, it's tough when you talk about the training regimen, the training requirements, the time frame, most police agencies are down. I would venture to say 20% of what their allotted manpower is. So that's part of what the challenge is. Now, when you say fundamentally change, here's where I see a fundamental change. The training, yeah, we can always beat that up. We should, but feasibly, it's very tough to at this point to say 2 years, although, we do need to beef it up. For me, the fundamental change is in the mindset and the culture. So, for example, instead, if you look at most of the things that have occurred, selling CDs, passing a counterfeit $20 bill, maybe that if he did do that, George Floyd referring to it, that's a felony. But when we talk about this, most of these things that have occurred are minor traffic offenses or minor offenses that have led to the death of Black and brown people. And so my fundamental change for me is the fact that, we need to stop chasing taillights. We need to, police officers have the ability. So let me make sure I appreciate this form, because people need to understand they have the ability, because you give them implied consent. They can run your license plate by you just driving by. And we know, again, disparately, that they do that. If they see somebody that they deemed suspicious or Black and brown, I get my plate ran often. They run your plate and they can pull you over. A police officer can find any reason for the Michigan Motor Vehicle Code, I can pull you over because the tread on your tires isn't good.
Yeah.
I can pull you over for anything. So we can always come up with those things. The fundamental change needs to occur in that aspect of things, that aspect of saying, okay, we're going to get rid of a lot of these minor traffic infractions and not make them offenses where we can start use them as pretext stops. So that's my idea of the fundamental change, along with an increase in training, absolutely. But let's be real, you can't train away prejudice, you can't train away bias, but what you can do is you can be more thorough in the initial application process. And then here's the other part that I gotta say, since you brought this up, I love it. We need to have more people on the police departments that look like us.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem. Part of the hugest part of the problem, you know, and being, again, a bridge builder, I get to have this conversation with the cops and the conversation with my community. And I love this opportunity because it's so frustrating for me. You kind of open up something. So Benike, I'll come back, but I mean, it's frustrating for me, you know, with this whole idea of what's going on with, you know, we cheered about the George Floyd verdict. We celebrated, people threw money in the air. So all kinds of different things. And absolutely, we should be glad because but we're cheered about something that should have happened. You know, that's a no-brainer. But here's the other part of this. The other part of this is, you know, for me, we got all excited, we as a community, but here's my thing. What's next and who's next? Not who's next in terms of getting killed, not what's next in like, oh, whatever, but what's next and who's next? We have an ability right now to integrate, if not infiltrate, police departments, because now, because of this movement, they know that they need to hire more people that represent the community. And yet and still, I get it, nobody wants to do it, but it's changes effective from the inside out as well as the outside in, and more so from the inside out. So it's a tough position to be in. So there's the reform, increase in hiring minorities, diverse people that look like the communities that they serve, increase in the background checks, increase in training as best we can. But we need to start doing something more than just standing around and cheering these verdicts and marching. And again, you know, I know it's not a popular thing to say, but we need help. We need help. And we need to, you know, I would venture to say a lot of the things that happen, they didn't happen at the hands of black and brown police officers. Even though some were present, there's been many cases where we've been able to avoid things happening because we have a better understanding of our community.
You know, those are some very powerful points. I know that Lincoln University in Missouri, HBCUs, they started their police academy, I believe, to recruit more Black people into the ranks and train them to be responsible police officers. Right in New Jersey, we have our president from NAPAC USA on the line, Dr. Nelson Alua. He can attest to this. Right in Newark, New Jersey, Mayor Ras Baraka did a lot of reforms in the police department to the point they haven't fired a single shot. And so I think one of the things we have to do, it goes back to your point, we have to do better training and just better service in terms of policing and connecting it with the community, with people like us. But I do one more question for you. What changes do you think the future will bring to the area of law enforcement moving forward?
I'll tell you this, that I'm actually hopeful. I'm hopeful for both sides. As far as changes, I think that what I said in terms of people moving, law enforcement moving away from what a lot of people refer to as pretext stops, pulling over vehicles for minor traffic infractions. I think a lot of that is going to change in the near future because of what we're dealing with and seeing now. And you know, I've seen it in Lansing, the city of Lansing, who does have a Black chief, who's a great guy, who has a PhD, Dr. Daryl Green, good friend of mine. That's one of the things that he's pushing and pushed for, and they've made that change. The mayor's office has followed suit. Now, the officers don't like it, but oh well. They don't like it because they feel like that gives them a reason to go out and be the police, you know, but they can still be the police by responding and doing other things to serve the community. So I think that's one of the biggest changes that's going to come about is what or how we police proactively, and kind of minimizing some of those things.
Do you think part of that proactive movement, that proactive measure, should be reallocating the police budget by reducing the police budget and moving some of those dollars into mental health and social work aspects like this to fund the police movement that we hear about all the time?
That's already happening. There's a thing called critical response. I think it's critical response, CRT. Don't quote me on the actual acronym, what it stands for, but CRT are law enforcement and mental health workers that work together. They ride, the mental health workers ride, if there's two people in the car, they ride in the back seat of the car. They respond to areas. Detroit has it, some places in Oakland County. They respond to calls where there are a high homeless population, to calls where there have been mentally ill people. They respond and they do their best to help and not, so we're not incarcerating, but we're giving them, you know, the services they need, getting them to the place, getting them to rehabilitation facilities, getting them to if they have substance abuse issues. That's already in place. So I mean, again, these are things that people don't hear about or don't know. The reallocation, I think that what we need to do is look at how, you know, how the training aspect of things, and look at who we're hiring, quite frankly, and try to do something to increase our hiring pool, like I said, to get more Black and brown people involved.
All right, so we're thank you for that. We're 20 minutes, 20 minutes before the hour. I know we've been talking, right? Okay, you have a question? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have a question for him. So, and it's in line with what you guys are talking about. You're talking about police reform and what we can do to reform the police. So, Cariel Horn was fired for intervening when a white colleague had a Black man in a chokehold. And on April 13th, which is last week, New York court reinstated her pension and back pay. Part of reform, what comes to mind when I read that is, how do you think that situation, coupled with the situation in George Floyd case, where you have a police officer with his neck on someone's knee, and you have 3 junior officers, which I'm assuming didn't intervene because that's their superior, I'm assuming. And if they know of a situation of Cariel Horn who intervened and lost her pension, then they're not inclined to intervene. Do you think, as part of reform, that with this verdict of the George Floyd situation and the other police officers that are going to stand trial, do you think things will start to change in situations like George Floyd? You'll have police officers speak up rather than just stand there like they don't know what to do?
That's a very interesting question, Benike. I don't think from man, that's tough. I don't think that those police officers didn't speak up because of fear of retaliation directly. I think they didn't speak up because, and not the Derek Chauvin was not a supervisor. The culture is this: whoever's the first on scene is the primary officer. They handle everything, and it's the military police, a paramilitary organization. So that's kind of how it works. I think they didn't speak up for fear of retaliation. They didn't speak up for more that herd mentality. You know, the idea that, okay, well, this is how it is. It's just what it is. One officer did say, "You think you should take it?" I think I don't think he may have been a Black officer. I'm not sure, but he did say, "You think you should?" And he just acquiesced. Now, because he was a junior or lesser time, and the other one had the most time on, he didn't. But I can tell you many times where I was the junior officer and I intervened and said, "Man, no, stop. That's not to that level." I mean, I haven't experienced it where it was that level, but where people are getting out of hand and I've said something. So I think that this verdict, you're right, it will empower people even more, but it's really more of the herd mentality of being an individual in that subculture that you just talked about earlier with policing and people saying, "I was a man before I was a cop," you know. and I can speak up. I mean, I'm not going to allow this to happen. So that kind of thing.
All right, and then my last question, and then Akindele, you can have it again. I am monitoring the chat. You said something, use a phrase earlier. You said chasing taillights, right? And when I hear, and I'm not sure how you meant it, but when I hear that phrase, what comes to mind is these people, these white people that pick up the phone and call and say, I see a black person, you know, and as a police officer, you really get in your car and come to that? Because I see a white person right now and I'm thinking of calling the cops because I do see a white person.
I think you should.
Yeah,
No,
I do. I see a white person out there. So, and I feel threatened. So I need to call the cops. Like, do you guys actually really get in your car and come for stuff like that?
We don't. So as asinine as that sounds, we don't have an option. If we're dispatched to something, we have to check it out. Because yes, there may just be a black person standing out there, or it could be a person with a gun who's black, brown, purple, and green that decides to shoot up somebody. And if we don't come, then guess what? That because of this lack of real qualified immunity, we're liable. So it's all about how you approach this. I'll give you a classic example. When 9/11 happened, the day or that week up, I was working in the city of Auburn Hills, working for the Auburn Hills Police Department. And I'm working there. And one of the threats was that the possibility of a plane, it was the day after, a plane hitting Chrysler, because Chrysler is the third largest office building in the country, in the United States. So there was a threat of it. So guess what kind of calls we got all the time? Middle Eastern man at Chrysler or watching Chrysler or headquarters on this road. And we got those calls. We got those calls all the time. So it wasn't just us that got it. It was a call because of them. And we respond. I responded as best I can and said, hey, I have to come. I don't mean to be disrespectful to you, but I have to come out and just check. I'm sorry that people are the way they are. Have a nice day. That's it. So it happens. It happens, and we have to respond to that. We don't have an option whether or not to do it.
All right, in chats, we have a question that says, when a civilian commits a crime, everyone is culpable regardless of if they committed the crime, right? Mm-hmm. Why aren't officers held to the same standard of culpability when they do not intervene? And I assume that she's referring to, again, the George Floyd situation.
Well, they are. I mean, that's why they're on trial as well. And they were arrested. They were arrested, correct? So they are. I think, and maybe what the question is more so related to how come they just don't stand up and speak up in the very beginning, which again, I don't know what people's mindset is and why they wouldn't, but I mean, I know why they wouldn't, but that's why we need to be stringent and do better interviewing and hiring practices to have people on board that are willing to stand up and have integrity.
Akindele, you have anything else?
Yeah, there's another question. How can we remove police officers? This is in the chat. Police officers or resource officers from our children's schools.
I don't know how you can remove if there's an issue with an officer. I mean, the bottom line is to go to that department and complain, but don't talk to the sergeant on duty, or you need to, first off, write a written complaint. Make sure you get that person's supervisor, and then make sure you follow up with that person's supervisor on top of it. But that's something that would have to come through the departments and the school systems and things of that nature.
I think that question was asked because I've heard this question many times, working in K-12 in the past. And I think that question was asked is because some people feel that we are over policing in everything, including schools. Working in at-risk schools over the years, it's a slippery slope. On one end, you have to feel safe as a teacher, as an administrator. On the other hand, you have to make sure the children are safe, but at the same token, we don't want to over police and turn the institution into a police state. And I think that's why that question was asked.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the clarification. Hopefully that's what they meant. But let me speak from again the other perspective. I mean, obviously I got this brown skin that I'm in, that's who I am. But why is it always over policing? Maybe it's relationship building. You know, you have police officers that are in schools districts who, if you think back, I'm sure some people that are on this call have had police officers in their school and they had great relationships with them. Those cops that are in the school are not the hard cops that are there to, trust me, that's a cake job. Let's just say that. They're not there to arrest every student. They're there for relationship building and report officer. Now, if a criminal offense occurs, absolutely, they're there for that purpose, but that's not what that's about. And so it lends to this. Here's the other side. This whole premise. When your kid is acting up, your little young child is acting up, and you see a police officer, you're in the grocery store, the cop's in the grocery store, and the kid, the 2-year-old is acting up, what's the first thing that we do as parents? We look over to that police officer, we look at our kid, and what do we say? If you don't stop, he's going to arrest you. That's the same mentality, and maybe it's not as prevalent as it was when I was growing up, but that's what happened all the time. And that's what I got as a police officer, you know, years ago when I was. And so again, we're creating, I'm not saying that cops are all good, but we're creating this mentality. A lot of these guys, they're DARE officers, they're teaching drug abuse resistance, they're doing PAL stuff in the schools, they're doing stuff to establish a rapport and a relationship, not to over police. That's not the case often, but again, that's why I love having the ability to bridge the gap and talk from both sides, because that's typically the purpose.
All right, we have 10 minutes left, and I want to ask a question that I think is on the mind of a lot of parents.
Mm-hmm.
I have a Black son, he's 25,
Mm-hmm.
and I live in a white neighborhood, Northville, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Every day he gets in the car, I hold my breath because I'm afraid. He may run a red light. His tail light may be busted. I don't know why they're going to stop him, but I'm afraid. What, as a former police officer, what do you tell me and other parents that have Black kids? What do we tell our kids that when they get stopped by a police officer, apart from the common sense things,
Mm-hmm.
how do you want me to communicate with my son every time he's going out, that in case he has an encounter with a police officer?
Thank you for this question. This is hard. I'll tell you what I used to say. What I used to say was comply now, complain later. That's what I used to say, Bonike. In all that we've seen in this world, all that we've seen in this country, and all that's happened, it's hard for me to make that statement now and to say it. I'm not saying that's not what they should do, but you know, when you see the Kim Porters, when you see the George Floyds, when you see these egregious acts, you know, all I can say is still just be respectful as they possibly can. Don't make any overt movements, you know, listen, be still, just take their directives and just, you know, that's it. I mean, and pray. And I will say this, not all cops are bad, they aren't, but these ugly, nasty, bad ones that are poorly trained or malintent are messing it up for the good ones. So I can just tell you to tell them to please comply as best they can and be still. And again, I mean, don't run, just do what they ask you to do so that there is no question. And I just pray that they can complain later.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here, and you probably can't go into details. I haven't put you on the spot yet, but I think I am. You probably can't go into details because this is a fresh case. Joe Jones. So from what we know, from what we see on TV, which you may or may not be the truth, right? Before a video came out yesterday or 2 days ago, the story was he was belligerent, right? He was resistant, he was confrontational, yada, 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 right? But I saw something on Fox 2 yesterday or the day before yesterday where I think his passenger was being put into the ambulance. He's standing there. They did ask from the body cam, right? They asked him for ID. He said, I can't do that, or something to that effect. they asked him fighting, and he wasn't belligerent from what I saw. He said, I can't do that. And I swear, in a matter of seconds, they had this man on the grass and pepper spray. Why do you have to do that?
I did. You know what, Monique, I can't speak to it because I didn't see it. I can tell you though, I can tell you this though, I didn't see it, but I literally was doing a training for some police officers 2 days ago, 3 days ago, I don't know, whatever day it is, a couple of days ago. And they were talking about it. These were police officers who looked at they saw the cam, you know, they were talking about it, and I was kind of overheard them. They said that the state troopers, these officers who were not a part of it, said that the troopers overreacted and that the troopers didn't do a good job. That's what I heard from. But these were so here's the beauty of this. These are two white officers who are saying, looking at this black man in this position, who they saw, they had the whole video because, you know, somehow cops get the whole video. They said the whole video and they made that statement. So if what you saw is what you saw and what happened is what happened, then you got people that are standing up saying, man, that was terrible. That shouldn't have happened like that. People that aren't just that look like us. These are two white officers who, I mean, they're really white, who's saying this thing, which is encouraging to hear and see, but I can't speak to it myself because I didn't see it, but I did.
And I appreciate that. And, you know, I don't want to undermine the fact that he did do something wrong. At least allegedly he did something wrong. Okay. That's okay. But from the clip that was shown, they should, at least they started that clip, and this may be the media too, but they started the clip where he's standing right by the ambulance. His passenger was being put in, and we could hear they asking for ID. He did respond that he couldn't do that right now, something to that effect. And I saw before you could blink, it was he was not being aggressive, and he was on the ground and they're wrestling. I mean, it was like, and by the time you know it, he red all over the face. That was unnecessary.
Yeah,
you know,
I didn't see. I will watch it, but I didn't see it.
Please do, because the reason I bring that up is he's my son's friend. They're the same age, so I'm afraid. I hope my son doesn't drive drunk, but you know what? Shit happens. And sometimes we make bad choices, and better make it now at 25 than to wait till you're 40 to start doing stuff stupid like that. But if he says, if he responds anyway, and they're just determined to roughen him up, then I feel as a parent, I haven't prepared him enough for what's out there. And I don't know how to prepare him, because we're dealing with you, and I say you all, because like I said, that's the police officer I see in my face. So, you know, now you say all police officers are not bad, but can you see how we as civilians feel like all of y'all the same things?
Absolutely. I can see it because I'm black. I get it. I get it. But again, you know, I got to speak both sides and try to change the narrative and help the good ones and get rid of the bad ones. And same here. So my pitch, you all tell somebody to go and be the police and let's fix this. Let's fix this. But no, I do see that. And that's why I really appreciate this forum. I really do.
Akindele, you have any questions? Andrew. Oh, Andrew Brown Jr., the man who was executed in North Carolina. What are your thoughts or comments regarding not releasing body cam videos to the public?
I don't know what I don't know anything about that case. So
okay.
I know that most of the officers or most of the departments have been releasing body cam pretty quickly because of what's going on. And I commend the departments around the country for that. Elizabeth had a quick question too. Is there a database? I want to just address that where bad officers can't be hired at another precinct anywhere in the country, right, Elizabeth? That was what you said. There is what we do is we flag them here, and I can speak to Michigan. What we do is when an officer commits an egregious crime, we either revoke them, which means they can never be a cop, or we will flag them if it's something that is not completely a criminal or something questionable, which means that they have to be at least looked into very thoroughly. So there is some sort of mechanism that we have, absolutely. Sorry, didn't mean to steal your thunder, Benique. Or
no, hey, it's your floor. You're in the hot seat. I'm not.
This seat is comfortable. I told you you've been way worse than me. I don't know what you said. This is easy.
Well, Akindele, I think we need to have a part 2, and we need to really put him in a hot seat. You know, I think we were too soft. We're too soft with him today.
You know, we're down to a couple of minutes. before we conclude, and I know we have extra
We
questions
have
and
one
things.
more question. Yeah, let's do this last one.
Okay, all right.
How do we truly arrest racist treatment by both officers? Let me read that again. How do we truly arrest racist treatment by both officers, both black and white? And I'm not sure I understand the question. So maybe Shagun, can you rephrase that? Because I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah,
what
I'm
you're
sorry.
saying.
I'm driving in. Okay.
You can
How
tell
do
the
we?
cop you're driving and texting.
No, I'm not
Look,
driving and texting. I pulled over right now. I know.
Okay.
bro, are you good with me, bro? I'm good.
So my question is, I mean, I know we're talking about some of the behaviors of police, but it's we as a black man, we get that treatment not just from white officers, but also black officers. So sometimes we feel that the training that they go through is we get scrutinized as black people more. And it doesn't matter what color the cop is, whether they're brown, yellow, whatever, but black people always get treated worse. How do we address that? How do we truly address that?
So I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate your question. I think that, you know, everybody has biases. And, you know, as a black cop, as a black man, I recognize that, you know, the disparity against black people. I recognize that there's some black cops that are harder on black people, but I also recognize that there's some black cops that aren't, that get it and they understand and they give breaks. I think the reality is that, you know, we just try to train to recognize biases. That's what I do. I own my own training company. I do bias training and try to recognize and embrace, you know, make people understand that we see things and we project. I mean, we see these have these feelings. So I don't know if there's anything that we as the public can do, but I think that that's why we have to continue to do the training for black officers, white officers, every officer to recognize that yes, you know, my parent, your parents were racist, and those racist comments they made, though you may not feel like you are, you still have those things that are in you, those things that you heard. So when you see a black man or even a black on black person, you know, yeah, you came from the hood and vowed you never go back. This is what you feel about it. So when you see a black person, this is how you respond. So I think we just continue to do that kind of training and try to help as best as possible. And I'm not in a rush, guys. If you want to keep going for a few minutes, I'm comfortable with that. But if we need to stop, I'm okay either way.
Well, we do have Nelson that has his hand up, and I'll read Oluyinka's question. Nelson, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, this is Dr. Nelson Eluya, still at work, just trying to get off now. I just want to say thank you, NAPAC Michigan. Thank you, Akindele. Thank you so much, Mr. Blackburn, for doing this. Just like COVID-19 has become a global epidemic, police brutality, especially in the Black community, is also epidemic and needs to be treated as such. And just like we as doctors of color, especially Black doctors, come to our community to teach us about, you know, health and health issues, especially with COVID and other health disparities that are taking place in our community. What you're just doing, Mr. Blackburn, is the same. We need to have such conversations. We need to get our people informed. Information is power, so that they get to understand how things really are and how to address certain issues. Words where the first one you said earlier on was, you know, comply and complain later. And that's one thing we need to understand. Just comply because they hold the gun and they have the authority. So subsequently, you can take steps, you know, to mitigate other issues that come out of it. Another powerful thing you said, we need to have individuals who look like you, who are in policing. From the top, I mean, Akindele just gave an example of what happened in Newark, and I know the mayor personally, we've worked together, and that's because he's Black, that's one, and he grew up in the system. He understands what it takes, and he made sure that a lot of people who are police officers in Newark are from the community, and they're also people of color as well. So they understand all of this, and that's why we get those results. So just like in medicine, when they tell you you're more likely to survive or live a better health, attain a better health outcome if you're taken care of by a Black doctor or a doctor who looks like you. The same things you apply to police force as well when it comes to policing our communities. So I must say thank you. And I think we hope the entire NAPAC USA, thank you all for doing this. And Bonike, for all those hard questions, I've been listening. And for everything else, I thank all of you who are on the panel, on listening tonight. I shared the whole information all over my platform so that people will come listen. And I think we need to have a part 2 of this. And I must say thank you and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Nelson. Thank you. Oluyinka.
Yes, thank you. I came very late to this meeting, and like the earlier speaker said, we thank you for doing this. My own question is about, what are we doing so that the police and the policymakers can engage with the community so that when we come in contact with police, how do we respond to it so that it doesn't always lead to an escalation? Even though I know some of the things that we've seen on TV may not necessarily be provoked by the victims, but I also believe that we have some degree of disciplinary issue, from my own day-to-day interaction with some people, that you have to tell them that, look, there's no need to respond in this manner. How do you respond when an officer asks you a simple question of, let me see your papers, let me see those things? Is it possible that some of us do not know how to respond without provoking confrontation?
Wow, that's heavy. That's heavy. Man, you asked me to come, so I'm gonna keep it 100 or keep it real. I think that some don't know how, and some feel empowered to be obstinate. They want. I think because of the, let's look at the picture in this country. Yes, the optics are bad. Yes, there are officers killing Blacks. Yes, there are these things that are going on that are terrible. But there's some people on the other side, on the civilian side, who just want to say, F the police. And if they pull me over, right, wrong, or indifferent, I know my rights, and I'm just going to be obstinate, and I'm gonna be against them, and I'm gonna argue. I'm gonna do everything to make their life a living hell. And so, I think there's some people who don't know. Then there's some who feel empowered to just because of what's going on to keep going. I really believe that that the majority of us, we want to get along, we want to work together, but there's just some people who just want to push it because of what they see. I know my rights. Heck, I was a police officer for about 10 years. I went to a police academy. I don't know all my rights. I know the stuff I know, but yeah, I know my rights. Let's just try to work at this thing. So the end goal is for everybody to go home safe.
Yeah.
That's it. Let's just do what we need to do so that you can be safe, I can be safe, and we can be about our merry way. That's what policing it should be. That's what it's supposed to be. Hey, you did something wrong. I don't take it. Oftentimes, what the cops do is they take it personal. The people take it personal. The cops take it personal. You cannot be in this job and take things personally, because when you take them personally, then that's when things escalate and you put yourself in a bad position. So I think that that we just we need to educate our kids, like Bonike is saying. We need to educate our communities and just tell people, shut the hell up. Deal with it later, so that you can't. If somebody wrongs you, every cop has a badge. Everybody has a badge number. There's car numbers. There's times, the date and time. If you've been mistreated, you got the date, the time of the incident. They can pinpoint who the officer was, even if you don't get a badge number, even if you don't get all that stuff. So, I mean, running, don't run. Just get out. When they say get out, get out. Even if they are wrong, get out and maybe have a lawsuit later, but at least live to tell about it. So I do appreciate Olinke Lincoln, I'm trying, man. I'm trying. I appreciate your comment. I'm sorry I butchered it, but I'm trying, brother. But you're right. It's we at some point have got to accept some responsibility. Please don't think that Darnell Blackburn is not saying that anybody needs to die, be hurt, or anything. But we at some point have got to say, you know, okay, great example. I'm sorry, Bonique, cut me off if you need to. Great example. Let's talk about the young lady that stabbed, that was shot when she was stabbed. I know somebody put this in the chat earlier. I know those two girls came to that young lady, that young girl's house to beat her up or to do whatever. They came to her parents' house. Her parent, the young girl called the police so that the police can come. I get that. Yep, she did. She was the victim initially. She called the police. But how about, let's talk about accountability. First off, she's chasing these girls with a knife and her parents are standing by while she's chasing them with a knife instead of saying, get over here, put that doggone knife down. We're going to deal with this the right way. You called the police. Secondly, when she attempted to stab the first girl, the girl fell. And guess what her father did to the girl that fell on the ground? Did anybody see it? He kicked her in the head.
Wow.
Her father kicked that girl in the head while instead of grabbing her, his daughter, and getting the knife out of her hand, he kicked the girl that she tried to stab in the head. And then she went over and tried to stab another girl and she got killed. And he said, you killed my baby. Your same baby that you could have stopped. You could have made. I wish I would let my daughter grab a knife. I get it. They came to beat you up. But that girl, number one, the young lady felt empowered to do so because she knew her parents were not going to do the right thing and stop her. I'm not saying she needed to die. Please, I'm not saying that, but we got to understand that. But now we want to go and say, oh, he took an innocent girl's life. No, he saved two other girls' lives, even if they were the instigators originally. Put the knife down. So this is so disheartening as a person who's a law enforcement officer who's gotten in this to help people and gotten in this to see it. And then you got other law enforcement officers who feel the same way, who've gotten in here to help. And then they say this man has saved a life and he has to be in protection because he saved these other two girls' lives. I appreciate you guys having me here, and you know what I say you may not agree, but I'll tell you this: I will always give a right answer. What's right and say what's just. So this is just what it is, you know, and it's not always good on the other side. Both sides, we just have to be accountable and just comply and keep it moving. You know, I mean, Monique, I'm sorry, one more comment. If, you know, I don't know, Jewel Jones, when he said, when they asked him for his ID, and he said, I can't do that. Just maybe, had he produced his ID, he wouldn't have got sprayed. Not that they were right in doing that, but maybe if he said, here's my ID, okay, you got me, boom. But this is the problem, or part of the challenge is that we don't want to acquiesce, and then we want to say they're just, you know, they're killing us. We already know that there's a disparate treatment. We already know that they're fearful. We already know those things. So why would we agitate it or add fuel to this fire?
And you know what, Darnell, I think the conversation just needs to keep going on. Somebody said something in the chat earlier about, you know, having police officers talk to community members on how to interact with police. And you said something earlier, and you said you have a training program where you address implicit bias. We as citizens have implicit bias. I promise you, if a police stops me, I am on defense 100%. I don't even know what you're stopping me for, but I have an attitude. And I give you an example. The day after the law was passed that you can't text and drive in Northville. I don't know why they didn't make it a whole state, but they broke it down. I think in Troy, you can't eat and drive, and no, it's just different. But the day after, I got pulled over on 7 Mile. I was texting, and he pulled me over. And the minute he pulled me over, I had an attitude. And hindsight is 2020 because I have kids that now I need to protect. So I need to now start thinking how I act right. But I'll tell you, automatically I was on the defense. So when he came over, he says, you know why I stopped you? And my ex was like, I'm sure you're going to tell me. Now I'm sure a better response could be like, no, officer, or be humble myself. But and I think I'm like most people. You see the uniform, and the first thing I think is, oh, here go another cop. The damn cops. So I had an attitude. I didn't get a ticket because I was smart. I had a smart mouth, and I was lucky. He's white, and he said I was texting and driving. I said, well, the law that was passed yesterday says I can't text and drive, right? But it didn't say I can't talk and drive. It said I can't text. In order to talk, I need to use my phone to dial. That's exactly what I said to him. And as I'm talking, I know in my head, gosh, Bonike, this is so wrong because this is go the wrong way. He could have been an ass, honestly. And it could have been as little as a ticket, or it could escalate to wherever, depending on what kind of day he's having. In hindsight, I could have responded better. If I get stopped today, I'm probably still going to have an attitude, but I won't say anything, because I actually don't want to get shot, and when I see you guys, honestly, I just think you're trying to kill me. So I'm not going to say anything. And I think you're right. We as citizens need to have constant dialogue with police officers or law enforcement to say, okay, when you get stopped, like you just said, just obey. George Jones could have just produced his ID. He would, okay, you were drunk or you were not drunk. We can prove that later. But he did say, I can't do that right now. And maybe that ticked them off. It just went downhill from there. It just went. Now he's charged with all kinds of stupid stuff. Just it didn't have to get there. So I see a role that he played from the video, and I see a role that I played that could have gone wrong. So you're right. I think just as police has implicit bias, we're all human beings. So we all have implicit bias. And I think we need to constantly have this conversation that we're having now, to say, hey, why are you killing us? And then on the other hand, too, I hate to be in an environment where I'm constantly scared when I see the police, but if that's what I need to do so I can stay alive, then I guess that's just the world we live in.
Yeah, I think that's a travesty. And let me always say, I got to preface it because I want people to hear me clearly. And you're absolutely right in your words, is that, a cop shouldn't have a bad day and take it out on you. But let's just be honest. All of us are human beings. And I'm not saying that it's okay. I'm just saying we're human beings. And so we have to recognize that on all sides, we're all human beings. We are all human beings. And so if it starts here, if it starts off at 100 and everybody's pissed off, because they're pissed because of what you're pissed because you're getting pulled over, then the officer's pissed because you got a smart mouth, sometimes you got to say, all right, let's dial it back. Ma'am, here's what's happening. We got to dial it back. And it happens, but we need to have this constant dialogue. I am not telling you, I love this. That's why I'm still doing it. I love it because there's no other way to bridge this gap. One of my good friends is on the line. Her name is Andrea Jones. I love her. And you, Bonike. But, we had this conversation, and I'm sure that's why she's here, is because we had this if we have more conversations like this, we can understand each other and we can bridge this gap and help. I don't want you to be fear. I understand completely your fear of being shot, completely, but I don't want you to be fearful of getting shot. I understand your fear for your sons. I got Black sons. I don't want that fear to be there. I want us to be able to kind of coexist. And so these things are very useful. So I just encourage I would encourage, maybe as this organization goes, or any organization, maybe you say, hey, we want to do a training, my unconscious and implicit bias training. I do it with the cops, and the cops say, well, where's the community? And I say, well, they didn't take the oath, you did. So that's the truth. But the reality is we do need to have both parties in here so we can dialogue and understand one another. And how about this? Get to know one another. Get to see each other outside of the authority. First off, I got corporal punishment. I got spankings, whoopings growing up. I didn't like it. Police officers are authority figures. People don't like them because they're authority. When you show up, we are telling you what to do. Nobody likes to be told what to do. So we as officers need to understand that. And then the community needs to understand that we're just doing our jobs. And so it's just a nice bridge builder. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I see some comments.
I'm gonna combine two questions together from two different people. One person asks, are there words or phrases that you recommend in routine encounters that makes an officer that's already on edge feel that make an officer feel a subject is aware of and conversant with police code of conduct, and potentially makes the cop less anxious or confrontational. That's one. And then another one says, there is one thing to complying with a lawful order, but there's evidence that shows that some cops come off aggressive. So I combined two kind of unrelated, but if you can answer those.
The first one is there is, I mean, always just respect. You don't have to yes sir, no ma'am, yes ma'am, but just yes officer. I mean, you know, I always tell people this when I like to ask people, do you know why I stopped you? I used to ask intentionally, and I'm like, you know, I like to ask that question because I want to see if they're going to be truthful. If they're truthful, I used to give breaks more often. And you know, if it's one of those things, no officer, I don't know why you stopped, why you stopped me, but you know, or if you do know, just maybe tell the truth. Just be compliant and not confrontational more so. Just, you know, just, and be still. I mean, obviously keep your hands in a position where they can see them. Officer, my license, tell them what you're about to do before you do it. I'm going to get my license from here. I'm going to retrieve my license. Is okay to do that? I just wanted to let you know so that you can feel safe and I can feel safe. That's something good for you to be safe and I to be safe. That's a good statement to make. So here's what I'm going to do. What was the next question? The next part of that was
the next part was that there's been evidence that even when we comply, I'm paraphrasing here, that evidence has shown that some cops come off aggressive.
Yeah, they are. I mean, that's just what it is. If a cop or anybody treats you a certain kind of way, I mean, and it's really egregious, you always have the ability to complain. And again, I know some people don't feel comfortable because they fear retaliation, but I'll tell you, I mean, my son is, I've had my own son complain. I've complained about cops, my treatment of my nephews before. I went to departments and said something, you're gonna stop just harassing my kids. But I mean, I say it in a different way. So, I mean, some people are just, they are who they are. Some people don't deserve to have a badge and a gun, just like some people don't deserve to be doctors, lawyers, or whatever you guys are. So you just, if they are nasty to you, just, you know, document it and complain written, not just a call, but complain in a written format and send it to that person's supervisor and that person's supervisor. So
this is a personal question. Do you guys run, do you conduct psych evals on your police officers?
Very good question. Very good question. Something the general public, I love it, that they need to know and doesn't necessarily know. So there is a psych evaluation done. Let me say this. In the state of Michigan, which I think is a flaw, a police officer can be hired with a doctor checking off a box, a medical doctor saying that this person is free from mental and emotional instability. A police officer can be hired like that. That's one of the entry-level standards, is that someone has to check that off and sign off. Most agencies, there's 600 police agencies in the state of Michigan, most make you go through a psychological evaluation, but not all do. There are some smaller agencies that do. And that's something that, you know, that is governed in our office. And the reason that it is because, you know, some agencies can't afford psychological evaluations. And if they pick somebody that's messed up, that agency has to deal with the repercussions, but most do. Now, here's the other part of this. The part of this that is, I think, an issue is that after you get on the job, there is no requirement for a psychological evaluation unless a serious traumatic incident occurs, meaning a shooting, a stabbing, a death of some kind at your hands or you witness it. That's where I think the big problem is. We as in legislators, Akindele, I hope you're listening. Here's what you need to push in this for legislators is that cops be mentally evaluated every 2 to 5 years max, mentally evaluated for suitability, for the suitability to continue to do the job. Because that is where a lot of the problem is that we get burned out and we don't want to say we're burned out. And then we don't want to even go get help, because if we get help, then we're looked at as weak, or we feel like that we're in a position where we're going to lose our job because now somebody's going to say I'm crazy, something's wrong with me, and they're going to take my badge and gun from me instead of getting the help I need so that things don't occur. So very, very good question, Bonike.
All right, I'm done. I'm done messing with you today. So
Yeah.
I can delay. I can delay.
Yes.
You want to wrap up?
Yeah, we're gonna wrap up. We can't get to everybody's comments or questions. They're still in the chat room. I just wanted to first of all thank you for being here, Mr. Blackburn. We really appreciate you being here, and we also appreciate the team of NAPAC Michigan and other state PACs that are on this call this evening, as well as our national leadership. I'll end with this. It's important that we pass HR 1280 at the federal level. That's the George Floyd Policing Act. We need to be contacting at this point, we need to contact our U.S. senators to really lobby and push this bill to being passed. The police, regardless of how you feel about police, police and community have been traditionally important and been very important partners. All police officers are not bad, and all citizens are not good, unfortunately. But we have to, at some point, create those police reforms and increase community outreach and understanding one another. I agree with you, Darnell, about hiring more Black folks in policing, especially to reflect our community. And we should definitely push for that. And not just Black folks because of their skin, but also credible, good Black folks who will do the right job and protect the community in which we live in. I'm good friends with our police chief in Inkster. He's done an exceptionally a good job since he's been there. My partner in crime, who helps run my business association, and I first met him a few years ago. And one of the things we had concerns about was undocumented immigrants being picked up and deported. And he said he's not in that business. That's not what he's here to do.
Cops don't do that. Yeah.
He said, I understand the fear, but those Africans who live in Inkster, you don't have to worry about that. That's not what I'm here to do. And so he's been a great person. He has excellent community relations with the residents of Inkster, and we need to just duplicate that. So I'm going to end with that. Again, I thank everyone for being here. I know we said an hour. We have to do a part 2 of this conversation where we can get more people involved, more diverse thought involved, and most importantly, just keep the dialogue going. And God willing, we come up with solutions that we can execute and lobby on. So I'm going to thank you and end this. And God bless everyone. And have a good night.
Thank you, Darnell.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Take care.